Hello there. It was only 3 years ago that Boris Johnson embodied the future. Now he's history, and his party wonders what went wrong. Well, let's tell them. 10 years ago, during the 2012 London Olympics, a video of Boris Johnson went viral. The then Lord Mayor of London, wearing a suit and suspended from a zip line, jumped off a 45-meter high tower to rattle across London's Victoria Park. He got stuck about 100 meters from the finish. For almost 10 minutes, the politician, a Union Jack flag in hand, hung helplessly in the air 8 feet off the ground. "Things are well organized here," he quipped before asking for a ladder and rope. Perhaps that was a nod to Boris Johnson's later career as Prime Minister. Jumping high in the air alone with British flags and then getting stuck in the middle of the path, deserted by everyone? Well, in the December 2019 election, the Conservatives, led by Boris Johnson, got their best result in over 30 years. Their whopping absolute majority in the House of Commons gave the Prime Minister license to do as he pleased, or at least it's what he thought. Johnson wanted to redefine the UK independent and globally oriented rather than just European. 2.5 years later, his own party forced Boris Johnson to resign and is now deciding on his successor. A meteoric rise for Boris Johnson and an equally steep fall. What happened there, and how could it even happen? Boris Johnson will implement the will of the people, do the Brexit thing and bring stability. That was assured by Jonathan Holden in his family brewery in Dudley during the November 2019 election campaign. In the deindustrialized central English city, many people hoped for a new boom with Brexit and Johnson. A month later, the former Red stronghold fell to Johnson's Tories. In the former mining village of Creswell, north of Nottingham, lifelong Labour voters told German newspapers that they could no longer vote for Labour because Labour leader Jeremy Corbyn was a terrorist sympathiser. Labour veteran Dennis Skinner has been unemployed after serving 40 years in the Bolsover constituency there, for example. And today, 3 years later, everything is very different. How can you believe a man who breaks his own rules? Asked Wakefield pub owner Nick Stanley Lunn ahead of a June 2022 by-election. His Deep Fall pub next door to a former coal mine was symbolic. The Conservatives took Wakefield in 2019 and Labour took it back in 2022. Imran Khan, the former Conservative MP for the constituency, was now behind bars for a sex crime. Just 2 weeks after this, and a second lost by-election, Boris Johnson announced his resignation after losing 57 of his ministers and state secretaries within 2 days. The drama had actually begun 4 months earlier when Munira Mirza, the chief of politics at 10 Downing Street and one of Johnson's staunchest and most capable longtime supports, resigned. The reason for the split was a failure by the Prime Minister to meet Labour opposition leader Keir Starmer in the House of Commons during a debate on Partygate, the scandal of unlawful gatherings of the Prime Minister's staff during the Corona lockdown, and partly with Johnson's personal involvement. The Prime Minister countered repeated revelations about this with denials and denials, which regularly collapsed and eventually led to an independent investigation. Instead of apologizing for the incidents, Johnson claimed that even during his tenure as Britain's Attorney General, Starmer let go of paedophile BBC show host Jimmy Savile, who had sexually molested or raped at least 500 women and girls for decades. This accusation is false, a lie by British QAnon supporters. Johnson's claim was a low point even for PM's friends. And earlier, Conservative MP Christian Wakeford, another representative of a Labour stronghold freshly conquered by the Tories in 2019, defected to Labour in the middle of a parliamentary session, also because of Partygate. And in June, after the full release of Chief of Staff Sue Gray's investigative report into the illegal gatherings, after 4 lost by-elections and a miserable result in the local elections, the Conservatives were left wondering whether, with Boris Johnson at the helm, they could go on with this, could inspire the country and win the next parliamentary elections. The result is well known. On June 6th, 41% of the Conservative faction voted in a no-confidence vote against Johnson. That wasn't enough to get him ousted, but when news broke in early July that Conservative MP Chris Pincher had grabbed men between the legs while intoxicated and that Johnson had not told the truth about it, the moment had come to act. Enough is enough, wrote Health Secretary Sajid Javid in his resignation letter on the evening of July 5th, the first minister in an avalanche of resignations from Boris Johnson's government that ended with let's call it the political death of the Prime Minister himself. How carefree the days had been for Boris Johnson 14 years earlier, when he was running for the Conservatives in London's mayoral election. Major is something different, against Labour's Ken Livingstone. While many Londoners knew that Johnson was a Tory, politically inappropriate for left-earning London, he was seen as not a real Tory, more of an entertaining prankster, albeit of the elite variety. This odds figure as mayor, that was an expression of London esprit at the time. It was well known that Boris Johnson had been fired as a journalist because he made up stories, or that the former Conservative Party leader Michael Howard had fired him as an office assistant because at the time he was still married to his first wife, he had made another woman pregnant. But few cared as long as he did the job. Johnson's victory in London in 2008 made him the most powerful politician in the British Conservatives 2 years before they returned to David Cameron's government. As Lord Mayor, Johnson brought precious little to London and cost the city a lot of money. He promised a reduction in crime, but even former employees confirmed today that he lacked a plan for this. On the contrary, he even cut the police forces on duty. And not having a plan is something we all know about it. Instead, even then, there was a penchant for nostalgia and modern packaging. Johnson had a new London double-decker bus planned that should combine tradition, new design and modern technology. When the Route Master, as it's called, finally hit the streets of London, it wasn't long before one of the most technologically advanced buses in the world, according to Johnson, turned out to be an overpriced flop. The idea was to give the buses back to the old days with an open rear platform so you can get on and off at any time. But that would have necessitated the reintroduction of conductors and was therefore priceless. So it was closed biplanes, but they consumed more fuel than other models. On the other hand, Johnson left a plan by his predecessor Ken Livingstone to reintroduce a streetcar, although a consortium even offered him to take over the construction costs. Johnson invested millions in plans for a new major airport and a new garden bridge over the Thames, two projects that never saw the light of day. A cable car route across the Thames has actually been built, but hardly anyone needs it. Others fared better and are still associated with Boris Johnson's name despite having little to do with him. For example, the 2012 Summer Olympics, a highlight of London's international reputation, but which had been planned long before he was mayor. Or the city rental bike with which London became a pioneer in Europe in 2020 and which everyone called Boris Bike, although that too had been a project of its predecessors. After all, the mayor himself often rode around the city on a bicycle and built London's first citywide bicycle lane network with white-blue bike lanes on May streets. Well, we have them in red, by the way. According to Will Walden, the mayor's communications director, Johnson was happy to shift any responsibility onto others. And then there was the issue of women like US businesswoman Jennifer Arcuri, who revealed a few years ago that she had a sexual relationship with Johnson between 2012 and 2016. An official investigation into whether she actually enjoyed any city privileges is still ongoing. For Boris Johnson, becoming Lord Mayor of London was a springboard into national politics. As Britain's most popular politician in the polls, he figured he had a good chance of succeeding David Cameron as Prime Minister when he pledged not to serve a full term after the 2015 general election. At that time, Johnson won the safe Conservative constituency of Hillingdon and Uxbridge in West London and did not stand for re-election as Lord Mayor of London the following year. Instead, he pounced on the Brexit referendum. He was late in deciding to support leaving the EU, but then he was the poster boy for the Brexit campaign. The Vote Leave, we all remember that, under the imaginative slogan of Brexit chief strategist Dominic Cummings, according to which Brexit would cost the British health system £350 million a week, or will gain that. On June 23rd and 2016, it proved that he had backed the right horse because Brexit came through. After Cameron's resignation as Prime Minister, Johnson considered running for a successor. His comrade in arms, Michael Gove, torpedoed his chances with the words which were prophetic from today's perspective. I hesitantly came to the conclusion that Boris Johnson is not able to govern and build a team for the tasks ahead, he said. And the rest is history. Theresa May became party leader and Prime Minister, delegating Johnson to the post of UK Foreign Secretary, despite his rather undiplomatic character. In July 2018, he resigned in the dispute over Brexit and turned into a mouthpiece for the hardest possible Brexit and into Theresa May's #1 opponent within the party. Johnson's resignation as Foreign Secretary was the starting point for the post of Prime Minister when May herself announced her resignation in May 2019 after a debacle in the European elections. Boris Johnson, who even left London once made mayor, was considered a politician with magical potential. In July, he became Prime Minister, Brexit strategist Cummings his Chief of Staff. And Johnson hit the table, especially in the negotiations with the EU. At the Conservative Party conference in Manchester in October, he had a big party. Let's get Brexit done. That's what the new Prime Minister shouted 7 times in a speech, to the delight of the audience. He was cheered with shouts of Boris, Boris. And Johnson then led negotiations with the EU to a conclusion and duped his partners in Parliament, the Unionists of Northern Ireland, with his Northern Ireland Protocol, which created a customs border between Great Britain and Northern Ireland. Brexit was now, complete from their point of view, and the parliamentary majority was still missing. Boris Johnson got it in early elections in December 2019. During the election campaign, Boris toured around the north of England like a rock star. He spoke to the heart of the people with a vision of Britain as an independent, free and proud nation. While nobody in the mostly EU-friendly London wanted to smile at Johnson anymore, the Prime Minister was able to inspire people outside the capital. In a small village in Fishlake in South Yorkshire, German newspaper journalists met the two hairdressers Helen Copley and Georgina Holling. Johnson is okay with his jokes and he was a successful mayor of London, they said that time. Johnson, a lifelong Epicurean, was suddenly proclaimed a pillar saint for the underprivileged. What a joke. The election was won brilliantly. Brexit was negotiated, and on the night of January 31st in 2020, many celebrated the United Kingdom's exit from the EU and the Prime Minister. John Hodson said at the party in Parliament Square at the time, "I'm here to tell the Remainers, fuck me." It's a quote. The dream of great freedom ended quickly, though. The coronavirus spread. Johnson reacted too late. His liberal instinct resisted restrictive measures in everyday life. This cost thousands of lives at the beginning of the pandemic. Great Britain was at the forefront of dying in Europe, and Johnson almost paid with his life for his daring personal handling of the virus. He fell ill and was temporarily in the intensive care unit. But his own survival did not lead to Johnson's disciplining his administration. On the contrary, the Prime Minister granted employees certain freedoms, such as drinking at work, including unauthorized gatherings in the middle of the lockdown. When that came to light, Johnson claimed in the House of Commons that there were no parties at all, that all rules were followed. 2 investigation reports and 126 police fines later, including one against Johnson, proved the opposite. The more Johnson was criticized within his own party for Partygate, the more he tried to counteract this with populist slogans. Attempts to deport asylum seekers to Rwanda, restrictions on the right to demonstrate, a culture war against wokeness. It did him no good. And Johnson's achievements? In addition to the implementation of Brexit, one may judge it one way or the other. There are billions invested in ailing parts of the country, and his courage to have increased taxes to finally ensure a better health system, although I think it's more on Sunak this time. Johnson remains at the forefront of military support to Ukraine to this day. His commitment to climate neutrality was genuine, to the horror of the Tories' right wing. Now, the registered members of the Conservatives decide who will succeed Boris Johnson. Former Treasury Secretary or Chancellor of the Exchequer Rishi Sunak, or incumbent Foreign Secretary Liz Truss. The latter is considered the favourite also because she stood by Johnson when the wave of resignations left the government, unlike Sunak, who had obviously been preparing his campaign for a long time. But something else emerges from polls among the Conservative Party base. If Boris Johnson were to be re-elected today, he would be the winner, with more votes than Truss and Sunak combined. Retired Secretary Janet said at an election rally in the southern English seaside resort of Eastbourne these days, I would have really preferred Boris. It was a big mistake to overthrow him. Only someone like him could keep people behind him both up and north, and here so easily. So now it's over. It was wonderful and I highly recommend it, said Boris Johnson when he finally rescued from the cable car in 2012. Others were to blame for his getting stuck. I think they left the brake on, is what he joked. The truth is that Johnson didn't obey orders not to sit up while driving. He was probably a size too big for the construct, as today for his party. And some really speculate about him coming back like Trump is always announcing to do. God beware. And I'll see you in my next video. I'll be back.